It was in August of 2001, and I'm an avid backpacker, and I was reviewing my maps, and I had seen that a particular trail crossed over an abandoned tunnel that was on the Pennsylvania Turnpike. I thought it would be kind of neat to find it if I could and go inside of it and see what it was all about. Maybe it was a road machinery type graveyard where they would take equipment and just store it, and I just thought it would be kind of neat to explore it. So I found the tunnel. The portals were open, but they were storing salt on the end that I went in. So a friend and I, we began walking along the top of the salt pile, which ran out after about 30 or 40 yards, and we got down onto the pavement where we could see the original yellow lines. We had lights with us that were pretty bright, but they didn't do much good because it was so hot outside and cool inside, and there was a fog, like your high beams in the fog. But what we thought was neat was the sound that was in there, because my friend's good at whistling by putting two fingers to his teeth and whistling real loud. So he had done that a couple of times, and just the sound, how it echoed in that tunnel, was really pretty incredible. I was just about to tell him to whistle again, and we heard a piece of wood fall. And I know the sound of a piece of wood. As a construction worker, I know what a plank sounds like when it falls off a lift or two of scaffolding and hits concrete or blacktop. It has a distinct sound. That's what we heard. We both thought it was kind of strange, being that there'd be a piece of wood in that tunnel, but brushed it off and didn't think much about it. So we continued walking on, and we heard this roar that sounded like a lion in the zoo. It would just had power to it and volume, and it came down the tunnel at us, this sound, and it went right through us. We just froze. I mean, we could not believe what we were hearing. It wasn't even something that I had to look at my buddy and say, "Did you hear that? No, did you hear that?" We both heard it, and our legs just took over. We got out of the tunnel and hit the sunlight and just kept on running. It really confused me, because the tunnel, it was so long. It was over a mile, 1.3 miles, I think, and you could look at the far end and just see just the tiniest little pinprick of and that was the other portal. There was a way out on both ends. That's what made us really puzzled, because had that been a bear and we were intruding in its territory, I think that the bear would have gone out the other end of the portal, because that's where the sound came from, was further down the other end, or maybe even in towards the middle. It clearly, whatever it was, had a way to escape, and it didn't. It wanted us to know that it was there. In our opinion, there was nothing else that could have made that type of noise. Nothing else would have been in that tunnel. It was too creepy.
Speculation about Sasquatch hiding in subterranean caverns and old tunnels stretches back to the early days of Bigfoot research. Pioneers in the field, such as John Green, hypothesized that Sasquatch may use caves to hide from the forces of nature. And reports such as the Albert Ostman account imply a degree of habituation to caves. The state of Pennsylvania is littered with caves. With over 1,100 privately mapped caves, there are hundreds of pockets of cavern entrances that are inaccessible to most people.
So when we think of caves and we think of mines, the entire Chestnut Ridge is honeycombed with these kinds of things, both man-made and natural. The Chestnut Ridge is made up of limestone, one of the best places to find caves. And we can find cave systems around here that go from a couple of rooms to, some a little bit bigger, some a quarter of a mile, but some are also quite small as well. So if you would think that you are a self-aware creature and you wanted to get away from human contact very quickly, people have reported seeing Bigfoot out in the woods disappearing. One of my theories is that if this is a flesh and blood animal, one of the ways it disappears is by utilizing these caves or these mines just simply to get away.
There's a big cave system at the south end of the ridge, it's Laurel Caverns. I mean, that of course, they do tours, they take people in there.
Yeah, there's a lot of caving systems up there. Matter of fact, there's several caving groups that go up there and explore the caves. I believe on the ridge itself, for the 100-mile radius, there's over 30 caving systems. And of course, the Laurel Caverns on top of Skyline Drive in Fayette County, that's probably one of the largest caves. It's believed that that caving system links to several other caves in the area. And I'm sure you'll talk to Ricky Chirby. He's explored some of these caves and gone into them. They're pretty deep and they go on for miles.
Once in a while, I'll travel down there, and I'm not too fond of snakes, so.
Yeah. What do you find when you go in?
Nothing, just stuff people leave in there. And like I said, that one cave that I was in, it's called Barton's Cave. It's just an offshoot.
Near the Laurel Caverns, this was told to Ricky, and he was pumping gas at a gas station, and he has Bigfoot stickers on the back of his truck. And someone approached him and told him they were aware of a family of Bigfoot living on private property in this caving system right up on top of the hill from where the gas station was, which is a mile down the road from the Laurel Cavern.
The chances of that connecting to the Laurel Cavern in some way is fairly good, because where that property is reportedly at is only a few miles away. So chances are, if there is a cave opening on his property, it does connect. And the Laurel Caverns is a huge cave system.
Unfortunately, it's private property. We've never got permission to go on it, but we know the caves are in that area somewhere. We're hoping that if we continue to talk to locals in the area, they'll give us permission to go explore and see if we can find these caves.
Not quite sure the date, but it was probably around May 2010. I guess there were a couple coming down from Mud Pike. It was raining. I guess something on two legs come down off the bank, crossed the road, and went down over the other side. So they stopped and they got out with flashlights to kind of shine it down over the hill to see what they saw, and I guess another one come down off the bank. And I'm not 100% sure, but I think when they jumped back in their car and they gassed it, it never moved. They backed up and went towards it again, and I think, as far as I understand it, put its hand right on the hood. So that's probably all I know about that one, but I do know there was two of them there, and I've had several experiences right up the road from there. There's a cave that you can go in. Instead of rounding the corner to go to Laurel Caverns, you go straight down towards Quebec Run. And there's a trail called Rankin Trail. If you go down that trail and just veer to the right a little bit, if you blink, you'll miss this cave. And right before that trail, there used to be an old Winnebago RV parked in the field. And it's pretty much a frame now, but it was probably about 11:30 at night. I went up there, turned my truck around, and I screamed as loud as I could. Well, about 5 seconds after I screamed, something screamed back at me. It was real deep and guttural. And after that screamed back at me, something screamed at it, and it came from a totally different direction. So whatever screamed at me couldn't have made it that far in that amount of time. So I know there had to be at least two of something, and it's not a sound that I have ever heard. I've heard owls screech and, scream, and it wasn't anything like that, for sure.
So to think that a Sasquatch or a group of Sasquatch or any cryptid has access to that cave system, maybe to part of it that isn't accessible via the tours, it would be a perfect habitat or hiding place for them. Could explain why they're seeing so much, but yet, where do they go? That could be a plausible answer.
But there has to be other entrances and exits that we probably don't know about going into that cavern system. And it would make sense that if this is subterranean, uses these subterranean areas, that it has access that we just don't know about, right? It makes a lot of sense when you think about where the sightings are in proximity to this area and how they can access various points, and disappear without a trace, you know, potentially maybe that's how they do it. There's nothing spectacular or paranormal about it. They just know the quick exit.
In the 1920s, there was a supposed cave-in outside of Indiana, Pennsylvania. And the miners that were trapped within that cave said that within minutes of the collapse, something came out of the darkness, to the point that one person was actually scratched and had evidence of these claw marks on him. That is the first and really only case that I've ever received involving an attack within a cave. If somebody is going to say that they've seen a Bigfoot on the Chestnut Ridge, they are necessarily having to say they're seeing a Bigfoot around a cave because the caves are so numerous.
We did find, we made an interesting find ourselves, not necessarily reports that are given to us, but we made an interesting find a few years ago. Dwayne Pintoff was the first to discover it, and we explored this cave pretty significantly. It's not really easy to get into. You have to crawl on your belly and snake down through some different caverns and stuff, but at the bottom of the cave, Sean Dennis saw it, Dwayne Pintoff saw it, I saw it, hundreds of a variety of different types of animal bones. Deer, possum, raccoon, fox, squirrel, just piled up in this small cave area, and who knows what's living in the cave. I really don't know, but it was too small for a bear to get in, a big, like 300-400 pound bear. We could worm or snake our way into it, but that's the only thing I'm aware of. And we know where the cave is. We've been back up there a couple times. We've never seen anything come out of it or go into it, but something's living in it and something's eating pretty healthily in that cave.
In addition to the extensive cavern systems are the man-made tunnels and mines. The coal industry once boomed in the state of Pennsylvania, and while the rush may be over, the humanly constructed caverns remain, stretching deep into the mountains of the Keystone State.
Paul Johnson talked about it in his PA Bigfoot book, that there's hundreds of abandoned mines that even people don't know about, that better chance that they're coming from mines than from some of these smaller caves because they couldn't get in. Maybe if they could get in, though, opens up to a bigger cave. The mine theory is very interesting because why aren't people seeing them more? You know, and again, they can go into a mine, they can see, apparently they have very good night vision, they could see. Could account for some of the smell. These creatures are in those mines, deep in those mines. It does make sense. It does make sense.
One of the spots on the ridge, which is Dunbar, does still have an active mine that's in use. There have been historic sightings near that mine on that main road. There was a cluster of sightings right all around the same time. That is also where the Betty Knox area, or Betty Knox Road is, which is associated with a haunting, and there's also been Bigfoot sightings on that road as well. So, you know, the coal mining, you know, whether or not that maybe stirs up activity because of what they do there, it's hard to say. But there have been a lot of sightings down in Dunbar near that mine. And again, if, you know, depending on how far the mines go, if they connect to a cave system, if, you know, it could all be interconnected depending on, you know, it's hard to say.
It's up in Butler County, that there was a mine up there, up around Mars, PA. This would have been in the late 80s, early 90s. And there was a creature that was apparently close to this mine. They heard it and they saw it. But the interesting thing is they never saw prints going into the mine. Now that's one thing that, to the best of my knowledge, and I do not know of any Bigfoot prints leading into a mine.
During that 73 outbreak, when we had my teams out there responding to these cases, in some cases where we are in a close vicinity to a cave, for example, some of my team members, we would look around the cave. In some cases, we went in those caves or mines. We never found any indication that anything was staying in there.
The obvious downside of caves or mines is that typically there are limited entrances and exits. An intelligent creature like Sasquatch may be wise enough to avoid cornering itself in the event of an attack. But if they don't live in caves, then where?
I went through the same area I had already gone through just a few days earlier, and suddenly I'm finding these shelters, is the best I can describe them. Very rudimentary, primitive built shelters. People are not allowed to stay there. Scouts, mountain, these primitive camping guys, they would be fined and in trouble if they would have been caught there for any reason. It's not saying homeless or anyone else hadn't built these shelters, but I found one that was the size of a pup tent. That was the best I can describe. Something had taken a full-grown tree, drug it out of the ground because the root base was up in the fork of another tree, and then they propped it across the ground, and then they took a series of different sized tree limbs and built a shelter. But if you're walking in on the main trail like I had come into the woods that day, you couldn't see it. I stumbled across it because when I was coming back out of the woods, I decided to take a different route out, and I stumbled across these 3 makeshift shelters that were all within about 50 feet of each other. One was no more than just a basic lean-to against another pushed over or fallen over tree, and then the other one was probably something 5 foot could crawl down in it. It was underneath of a fallen tree that looked like somebody or something had scooped out the ground and then laid all kind of camouflage something hiding under this tree. And then there was this one full-size canopy that I found, or shelter. As I'm walking around taking pictures and scoping this out and making sure there was no indication of human activity anywhere, and I found none, I crawled into this one shelter, and I wanted to see how large it was, because outside it looked like it might have been 5-6 feet long. Well, magically, when I scooted down and crawled in there, it was way larger than I am. I had plenty of room in this makeshift shelter. Well, when I come out of it, that's when I got this horrible feeling of dread, like something didn't want me there. And I mean, I got cold chills just the way it was feeling, and I don't ever get those kind of feelings. I walk all over those woods. This time I felt like I shouldn't be there. Something doesn't want me here, but what is it? I saw nothing. If it was there, it was either laying prone on the ground or behind a tree, and I just didn't happen to see where it was coming from. But I know after I got out there, I exited the woods pretty quickly, as I just didn't feel comfortable. I went back several times following that, and I never, ever had that feeling of dread ever again. The second time that happened was in 2013. Dairy Ridge, which is me and another researcher, found this massive boulder, 2 foot, it turned out it was sandstone, perched in the top of a 50-foot tall tree that was growing up between 2 outcrop rock precipices, and it was another 12, 15 feet above where we were standing. Something had heaved or placed this massive boulder that was 2 foot by 18 feet by about 2 inches thick. Well, we figured that to be a 65 to 90 pound boulder. We still to this day don't know how that ended up there. Well, as one of my trips down to go back and check the boulder, because that's what we were doing, me and Tom was his name. Well, this one time I went by myself, something had taken full-grown, massive trees, because there's another trail that I had never ever went down, and they had placed this massive X-shaped formation right across this trail. And I thought, well, that's never been here. What the heck? Then I found the arches that were tucked and twisted under other fallen limbs, and I found a 10.5 foot limb that had been broken, snapped, and twisted, and I'm like, something's been through here. So I headed down this trail just to see if I could spook something out or have anything else happen or find other evidence. Went all the way to the bottom, didn't see or find anything interesting. I'm coming back up, just me, slowly. Well, by coincidence, my cell phone goes off. Well, as I'm passing through, it's a cluster, a wall of rhododendron on both sides of me. I mean, the only thing I could see was the trail behind me and the trail in front of me. I could not see 2 feet to my left or right. So I stopped because I didn't want to lose the signal, and I answered the phone, and I'm talking to this guy, and I'm standing there for 2 or 3, 4 minutes, no big deal. I'm very comfortable because I'm talking to a friend, and all of a sudden I hear off to my left something walking. I knew it wasn't a deer because it was taking very slow, heavy steps. I told him, his name's Cliff, I said, Cliff, I don't think I'm alone out here. He said, what do you mean? I said, I don't know what it is, but something besides myself is here right now. I said, I'm gonna get off this phone, I'll call you back when I get up further up the trail, but I'm gonna get out of this rhododendron. So I'm standing there, and I did a 360. I just stood real still, and then I turned real slow, and I even yelled out, if you're there, make yourself known now, show me yourself, I want to know who you are. Well, it was dead quiet when that was happening. And then I heard a couple more steps, And then it's when the feeling of dread just come over me. And I'm like, what in the heck is this? Okay, I don't think I should be here right now. So I didn't want to run or nothing, I just casually walked out until I'm in a big clearing. And I stood and I turned around and watched where I'd just come from and saw nothing. But that's the only 2 times that I felt this very powerful feeling come over me, like, you need to leave now.
Stick structures are often hard to classify. Many bushcrafters and outdoorsmen may build blinds and lean-tos out in the woods for hunting or primitive camping. When abandoned, these forlorn-looking constructs can perhaps be mistaken for alleged Sasquatch shelters. On the other hand, legitimately strange structures have been found, such as the ones discovered at the nest site in the mountains of the Olympic Peninsula. These structures, by their very existence, suggest a sentient maker able to plan and build a complex design from completely natural materials. Animal mutilations, while typically associated with UFOs, have also been attributed to Sasquatch. Deer carcasses found torn apart and stored in trees 6 to 8 feet off the ground have been speculated to be food caches placed there by Sasquatch, behavior that seems reasonable for a sapient species.
These animal mutilations that people are familiar with out in the west part of the country, they're very rarely reported in this part of the country. We have very, very few reports of this type of activity here in Pennsylvania. I've had reports going back probably at least the 70s and the 80s of people who have seen these things chasing deer in daylight, carrying deer over their shoulders, things like that.
The animal mutilation, probably a food source, right? I don't think it's anything related to a UFO activity, but I'm not...
What about deer?
Deer, we've had some instances where they found some deers ripped apart, missing heart, missing vital organs that would provide, sustenance for a large creature. But I've not had any personal experience with them in conjunction with any UFO sightings, or do I know any?
I heard a very interesting report of an unusual deer mutilation from the Laurel Highlands that happened in June of 2019. So this is not far from the Ridge area at all. Okay, and this was a businessman that had property deep in the woods. And from what I recall, early one morning, he was coming up his driveway and noticed something laying on the road. And he comes up and he's looking at the driveway, and here's his dead deer. But from what I recall, the top half of the deer, so the head, the front of the deer, was completely intact. The lower part of the body was completely missing. From what I recall, there was no bones, there was, I think, just a little bit of intestine, no blood. So the part of the body is completely intact, the other part is missing. I believe he came back about an hour later to clean up the mess, and when he came back, he was very surprised that now the rest of the deer body was gone. There was some intestines there, but there was no blood, no bones, and he thought this was one of the strangest things he had ever seen.
I heard of a case down in, I think it was South Carolina, where it killed a feral hog, a huge feral hog, just threw it over its shoulder. People have found deer tore up, which they think is not coyote or a bear that would eat a deer, but we have not, we personally, other than that one case in Washington County, we have not researched any up here.
I've received reports of people finding deer carcasses piled up that are not from hunters. The racks haven't been taken. Only certain organ meat has been taken.
I will tell you, I've got accounts of from an animal shelter of all places, where people had said that something was coming out of the woods, reaching over the fence and grabbing dogs and taking them with them. It seems to be habitual that the animal will come down and feed on something that was basically sitting there already fenced up for them, But in regards to other types of things, I have found carcasses of deer in trees before, far away from where normal people would be hunting. One of them, whenever I found the pelvis bone of a deer up in a tree, just by itself, as if, it was almost as if it were decoration. And then I found another deer that was pretty well torn apart. Now, there are coyotes in this area, so you have to be careful. But coyotes are not putting animals up in trees. Whatever was doing this, and it was high, it was over 6 feet high. So whatever was doing this, whether it was a person or what have you, there was a reasoning behind it.
They'll hunt coyotes, they'll use coyotes, they eat coyotes, they eat dogs. That's a delicacy. Yeah, I've heard them hunting coyotes. I've heard them kill coyotes. Yeah, what they'll do is they'll start a call, and that'll set the coyotes off. And then the coyotes will sing and everything, and the Bigfoot troop hunters will come in, they'll zero in on the coyote's location. They'll choose one or two, and what you hear is the coyotes just calling and singing and everything and yipping, and then all of a sudden you'll hear a sudden yip. Silence. We found a body of one afterwards, and it was literally twisted like a dish rag. Twisted. What they'll do is they'll slit, and they'll take the organs, the rich organ meat.
I had went up to the field in the edge of the wood line between the two farms and the cemetery, and was kind of just looking around to see if I could hear anything or see anything, and kept touching base with the people back at the base. Just looking on the ground, I found a big ball of fur, and I radioed in and said, looks what is to be, a tabby cat. We were wondering where that thing went. We haven't seen it for a while. Well, it had a head, it had a tail, and it looked like something with two thumbs just twisted it like a wash rag and threw it on the ground. So I think something with thumbs had to have twisted that cat.
Well, I know about the cattle mutilations. That's been reported several years now. And I know the Skinwalker Ranch last year had the cattle mutilation, and they actually called in Linda Moulton Howe as the expert, who has investigated numerous reports all across Nevada and Utah and wherever. Well, I haven't seen anything in the cattle, but I did have a personal where I encountered and found a very large hog, August of 2004. Again, this is when all this activity is supposedly happening, and it's in the same proximity of the road that we found the tracks on. There's a natural gas line that crosses this road, and it's very wide open. I get out of the car and I walk over to the edge, and I'm looking down, and just off to the outer edge on the right side at the tree line, I see this massive black figure laying on the ground. But it's looking away from me, so I can't tell what I'm looking at. Is it a dog? Is it a bear? Is it a Bigfoot? I'm hoping. Well, the person I was with, I said, you need to get out and tell me what you see, because she could see good too. So she gets out and she's looking, I don't know, what do you think it is? I said, I can't make it out, but I'm going down there and I'm going to see if I can make out what it is when I get there. Well, before I did that, I grabbed up a handful of sizable driveway stones, and I flung them down there until I hit it, and I could hear it thunk, thunk off its hide. It had no movement. I said, whatever it is not of this earth anymore. I'm going down to check it out. So she said, I don't think that's a good idea. I said, just here's a camera, you film me, I'm going down. If I need you, you stay here at the car. So I hiked down. It wasn't that far. It was maybe 100 yards, it was less than 100 yards. I walked down there, and as I got closer, I realized it's a hog, it's a pig. As I turn and get to the front of it, something looked like they had taken a surgical scalpel and cut its face completely off. It was gone. I mean, perfect. I have pictures of it. As freaky as that was, because the rest of the body was intact. Something had taken all the matter out of it. There was no brain, nothing in its head. Its skull was empty. That was kind of strange and freaky to me. So I took all these pictures and video, and she wouldn't come down, but I took the pictures to her, and then I called the game commission when I got back where I had cell connection, And I reported it, and they said, well, we don't handle farm domestic animals. We'll keep the report. We know the location, and if anyone reports a missing hog, we'll be sure to tell them where to come get it. And they also, one or two of the researchers said, well, you know, that might have been some kind of sacrifice or Satan worshiping. I said, well, it's possible. Anything's possible. We don't know, but it's bizarre. We never found a full-grown hog dead in the woods with his face missing. So the next week I go up there and this hog is gone. And you could not even tell it had ever been there. And it bled out all over the place. It was a mess. And we had not had any rain. But it was like something had completely cleared that area. And had you not seen it like I did, you wouldn't know it had ever been there. So I found that to be a very strange occurrence.
With so many animals disappearing, it's hard to believe that a single Sasquatch could be consuming all of them. However, if a group of Sasquatch were living together, the idea of killing and harvesting animals becomes more plausible.
There's a place called Millwood, which is right at the foot of the Chestnut Ridge, right outside of Derry. Whenever I've been interviewing a woman now, probably for about 20 some years, who claims that she grew up with a family of Bigfoot that inhabited, or at least visited, her orchard in the backyard of her home. She had claimed that whenever she was a child, these creatures would come out of the woods to feed on the apples, and she would play with the juvenile Bigfoot. Now, what is so interesting about this story is she's kind of giving a snapshot into the lives of these creatures. So they seem to be at least traveling in family pods of some kind. And if you start looking elsewhere, it seems that people do occasionally witness these creatures traveling together as families. But this went on until after she had children of her own. So she had said that these creatures were so habituated to her area and had no fear of her, there was a familiarity there, that they would keep on visiting each other throughout the year.
If these creatures live in family groups, that would make Sasquatch a predator, bringing home food that is hunted or harvested. Most predators tend to err on the side of caution, knowing that wanton conflict can lead to fatal injuries, which would prevent them from hunting. Avoiding that, they will look for easy prey, and nothing is quite as easy as prey that's already dead.
So one historic report, and this is a number of years back, there was a woman who ran and jogged along the railroad tracks every morning. And she happened out one morning only to see what she claimed to be a Bigfoot picking up a deer carcass that was apparently hit by a moving train, picked it up, threw it over its shoulder, and wandered across the tracks up into the woods. And that location there is right next to a little village called Hillside. Hillside, in the 73 flap of UFO and Bigfoot, there were a number of sightings in Hillside. So it's, very close quarters.
Gray Station's an active train track, and if you think about that as a food source, you don't have to really expend a lot of energy going after food. Bigfoot, picks up the roadkill from the train kill or whatever and takes it for a quick meal. Like, that makes a lot of sense. And an area where there's a lot of activity. In that same area, in the 70s, a Bigfoot reportedly shook a trailer and ripped the electrical box off it. So there's some really, those are two of my favorite sighting reports.
I could tell you a story that we were part of in 2003. We were on, my son and I, along with several other members of the PA Bigfoot Society, were at Gray Station, Westmoreland County. There was a railroad track in back of us, and we were overlooking a field which had a history of Bigfoot sightings. So some of our members were there, and other members were at another place further down, much further down this railroad track. Because one of the things that they were saying there is these, the trains were hitting some of these deer, and they were dead deer, and these Bigfoot would come and feed on the deer. So we're sitting there, my son and I, and he just happens to look over his shoulder and back of us. He said, "Dad, that star looks like it's moving." So I turned around, and it actually was in one position, and it quickly moved like that. And we were both just sitting there, like stunned. I mean, normal star, it'll shimmer a little bit. This thing went boom. So I happen to have a spotlight. I says, you know, I'm going to try to spotlight this thing. I want to put a spotlight on it, see what happens, because I have heard that people do that. They have interaction with them, okay? So I turn and hit it with my spotlight 3 times. They say hit it 3 times. Boom, boom, boom. 3rd time, disappeared. And it appeared back over here for maybe 20, 30 seconds. And it was star-like. It was shimmering. It was star-like, but it wasn't a star. And then it disappeared. So we're sitting there, we're looking at it. We weren't even looking at the field, right? There could have been 17 Bigfoots out there. We weren't looking because we were looking at this thing. And we waited. We were there another hour and a half with nothing. I mean, I kept looking, where'd it go? It wasn't a star. If it was a star, it still would have been there. Nothing. What was that? Another time was on up in Rockton Mountain, which me, Dave Rupert, and several other researchers were up there. And Terry had gone back with Carrie Rupert to their house, and we look, and it was a light. It was like a yellow bluish light, and I tell you what, it did some maneuvers I've never seen a light do. It kind of dropped in like a pattern like this, and then it went zipped up, it would zip back, twirl, and it was fairly far up, but we could all see it. And we watched this thing for about 20 minutes. And it eventually just disappeared and it didn't come back. Now we knew, again, it wasn't a star because we were sitting there and a star would have reappeared. It just didn't, it just disappeared. So whether it be star-like, my wife and I saw 2 triangle craft in Beaver County, 97, right around Halloween. They made a kind of like a movement like this twice over the river, which our friend Evelyn saw. We saw this in Beaver County, Hopewell, Beaver County. She saw it in Swickley, across the river, same time. And then they floated over us. And they were silent. They weren't up that high, they were silent. They had 3 lights, 1 in the middle, and then lights all in the middle, like a Christmas tree. And they didn't make a sound. If we weren't looking up, we would not have seen them. And there were kids in their Halloween costume just looking at this thing. Just looking at it, and again, you did not hear it. You did not hear it. And there was 4 eyewitnesses, myself, 5 with my son, my little son. There was 5 plus all of these kids. And we found out later from a gentleman that we know that the 911 center that in Alicopa got like over 200 calls. People were seeing this. I believe these might have been government craft. I did see one drawing very similar in one of my UFO books with the lights underneath. And if they are indeed ours, I'm glad they're ours, because those things could have went over a foreign nation. They were low enough they could have dropped bombs and they would have been out of there. It wouldn't have hurt them.
The Chestnut Ridge harbors many secrets, but one inescapable recurrence is the presence of UFOs in proximity to Sasquatch, whether it be before or after a sighting, or even the 2 being observed at the same time. While many scoff at the supposed connection between the 2, a significant portion of reports of Sasquatch include UFOs, and vice versa, a portion large enough to warrant further objective investigation. This, of course, does not prove or support the conclusion that Bigfoot is an alien. There is merely an evident correlation between these beings and unidentified lights. As it stands, the true nature of the UFO phenomena is unknown. Perhaps these aerial anomalies are not extraterrestrial or interdimensional in nature. Perhaps the truth is far more terrifying, that these craft are actually from us.